Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it will be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story. Mother thinks her child deserves my combat badge over a gold star child. So after being inspired by reading some Reddit stories, I decided to come here, make an account and share a story. To preface a little, a few years ago I was in the US Army where I did 3 deployments overseas. While on mid-tour leave, you would fly in and out of the US from a normal airport. You would walk in, go to your gate at the airport that is closest to you, fly to the airport in Atlanta, and then fly out from there with a few stops overseas, switching planes and all that until you eventually get back to Kuwait, where the staging area was, and take a military flight to a base with an airstrip close to you, and then normally travel by helicopter to an even smaller base close to you, and stay there until a convoy could come collect you, unless you were one of the lucky people deployed to one of the nice, large, relatively comfortable bases. It was not uncommon that while coming home in Atlanta, people would be there to greet and cheer on returning soldiers as they exited the airport. I got to Atlanta a few hours early, so I had some time to kill. I decided to check it out and stand with those greeting those coming home on leave. Here I am in uniform, greeting returning soldiers with random people, some of which do this because they are what's known as gold star families, others because they are just patriotic, or have a kid or brother serving. There are a number of groups who organize these things. Gold star families. Gold star families are families who had a direct relative like a son or daughter who died while serving. They generally get the utmost respect from soldiers and anyone around who even knows they are. Though it is not like they generally flaunt it. Some will wear a little bin when attending these events. It has a gold border with a gold star in the middle and a purple background. Their car may also have a special license plate, depending on the state, stating this that they got from the vehicle registry. So I'm standing there and shaking the hands of returning troops, and I notice that the lady next to me has a small girl and is welcoming the troops, and it looks like she's almost about to cry. I also happen to notice a gold star pin that's pinned to her jacket. The little girl also keeps looking up at me standing there as well. I can see her just out of the corner of my eye. One of the times I look down and smile at her, and at this point in my life I had no kids of my own or anything, but I have always liked kids. Since there was a lull in the crowd for the moment, I crouched down and asked her what her name was. Let's call her Lily. She had to be about 7 or so. She said she liked my badge. The badge she was referring to was the unit badge for the 101st Airborne. I had one on each side. If you're not familiar with the uniform, on the right shoulder is a flag, and if you have deployed, a unit badge under that. And on the left is your current unit badge. The combat badge may not always match the unit badge, even though mine did. The combat badge does not need to be worn all the time, though the unit badge does. This fact will come into play soon. Lily was really nice and cute. I started talking to her mother as well, and it turns out her husband, Lily's father, was in the 101st as well and was killed in action about a year and a half before. I did not know him, but I know the brigade she mentioned. I was deployed at the same time and heard about the incident he was involved in, but I didn't know any details regarding it. The division is pretty big and spread out when deployed after all. I don't remember the exact conversation, but it was mostly about her husband and all that. After a bit, it was getting time for me to get going. I pulled off my combat badge and handed it to Lily with a smile, saying something that I likely thought sounded inspirational or something at the time. She smiled from ear to ear and happily accepted it. knowing full well it came directly from a soldier in the same group as Daddy. I started to walk away after a wave and I felt a tug at the back of my jacket. I turned thinking it was Lily, but it was actually another kid that is probably about 5 or so, give or take.
Give me!
He tells me. Excuse me? He points to Batch. Sorry buddy, I don't have any more to give out. His mom then said,
Don't lie to my son. I see you have one right on your shoulder. You can give him that. I'm sure you have more somewhere.
Saying it almost as if an entitled valley girl would say it. This triggers her entitled kid and he starts throwing a huge tantrum. Apparently he really didn't like not getting what he wanted immediately, or he was shown at an early age that crying and yelling will get him what he wanted. I would say what the kid was yelling, but I don't think anyone would have understood it when they heard it. It is like the kid became possessed and was speaking in tongues. I would not have been surprised to see pea soup vomit spewing out like the scene from The Exorcist at that point. I'm sorry ma'am, I cannot take this one off. It is… she cuts me off.
I don't see what the big deal is. I pay taxes and that pays you. So you work for me anyway. And my taxes paid for that batch.
Ma'am, I also pay taxes. As a note here, this was just the first time I encountered one of those I pay taxes and you get paid for by taxes so you work for me types of people. I had no idea people like this even existed. And this was far from the last time in my life I would have to deal with people like this either.
You work for me. How dare you deny a child this? What kind of a soldier are you?
The rant continues, drawing a crowd. Inside I'm shocked, but on the outside, I keep a calm and collected attitude. By this point she had attracted a crowd. I didn't have the time or energy for this. I had to get to my gate and mentally had to deal with the fact that within a week, someone would likely be trying to kill me again. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but the answer is no. Now I have to go. I turn and start walking. Karen then grabs me from behind on the throat. Hand around neck, so fingers grabbing onto my actual throat. I'm confident she meant to grab my shoulder but had poor hand-eye coordination. Instinctively, I turned quickly and forcibly pushed her hand away with my forearm. The goal was not to hit her or hurt her but quickly remove her hand from my throat. Nothing more, nothing less. Luckily for both of us, her hand slipped right off but not before leaving some fingernail scratches on my neck. You know those insurance fraud videos you see on YouTube where the person unconvincingly jumps in front of a stopped car as though they were hit, landing on the hood and rolling off? It was like that. She stumbled down and started with the most fake cry ever, yelling about how I threw her on the ground. I seriously don't have time for this. As soon as it happened, I backed away, hands raised a bit. I wanted it to be seen for sure since she was yelling that I threw her on the ground, that I was no threat at this point. Karen then starts screaming saying I broke her perfectly fine leg and that she was going to sue me, and of course that phrase we all know and love,
"Do you know who I am?"
I did not engage at all from that point on. An airport officer was already walking up and saw the entire thing. She looked at me and then the woman on the ground and sighed audibly. She called on her radio and an EMT rolled up a minute later. I'm sure the officer knew Karen did not need one, but I'm assuming it's a form of protocol. The entire time she's asking me step by step what happened, and I tell her all the details. The same as a couple bystanders and a few other soldiers around did as well, confirming my side of the story. When done, I stand off to the side and wait. Being a smoker and this before the days of e-cigarettes, I was getting antsy. I was hoping to stop at the smoking lounge before heading to the gate, which back then they had at Atlanta, though I have no idea if they do anymore. But no time for that at this point. 15 minutes and I would miss boarding. I was screwed. If you miss your flight for basically any reason, you're looking at the least a demotion. I make a very quick call to my rear detachment, quickly fill them in on what has gone down, and hang up. Sure, I'm going to be screwed. EMTs check her out and she is totally fine. The officer asks if I want to press charges. At this point, my neck is sore, but I have no idea I have been scratched. I say something along the lines of no damage done, so no need. To which she pulls out a small makeup mirror and shows that I have some decent scratches on my neck and a little bit of blood on the collar of my uniform. I'm still not worried about it though. A couple days and that will all be gone. I let her know that I do not intend to press charges or anything. After hearing the woman shrieking like a banshee constantly, the officer turns and yells for her to shut up. In an amazing authoritative tone, she directs the woman to leave the airport immediately, shutting her down every time the woman tries to argue back. The cub ends with "You can either leave or you will be arrested, charged with assault." Even though I said no and Karen did not know that, and also banned from the airport. Luckily, Karen gets the hint and leaves dragging her poorly taught child with her. Her being arrested would have screwed me over big time and further delays, so I'm glad she just left. Now nice as if nothing happened, the officer walks up and asks to see my ticket. Seeing I'm about to miss my flight at this point, as this whole thing was a good 50-minute long ordeal, she makes a call for a minute on her radio and tells me to follow her. We go through a service door and through all these back hallways and even the luggage loading and sorting area, which if I had time would have been awesome to look over as I kinda geek out about that kind of stuff. Don't judge me. And pop out a door right by my gate. The officer thanked me for my service and I went to my gate. Turns out she called the security to hold the plane for me because I was told they were supposed to shut the gate 5 minutes ago upon walking to the gate. If I had not gone through all the back ways and bypassed security too, I would have easily been 15 to 20 minutes late and missed the flight. I called the rear detachment before takeoff and they logged it. My command in theater already knew the basics by the time I got back to base. My first sergeant was cool, so we joked about it for a bit, and that was the end of it. A week later I got called to my battalion commander's office. I'm thinking I'm screwed because it had to be about the incident. Turns out that the widow whose kid I gave my patch to was friends with his family. He was in that brigade when it happened. The guy had served under my commander to some degree in the same battalion. So we had a nice long chat about him, the deployment and life in a relaxed state. Nothing formal, no sirs, standing at attention, or anything like that. Just two soldiers talking. It is a small world it turns out. He showed me some pictures of them together and shared stories about some of the things they did. From mission planning, hiking back home, jokes and general fooling around all soldiers of pretty much any rank do to pass time while deployed. Like dressing up as Santa on Christmas and digging through countless boxes of MREs. Just to take the candy out and hand one to each of the lower enlisted. This was back in 2003, so there were no stores on pretty much any of the bases. Or apparently walking around wearing an adult diaper and a plastic toy bow in the command center on Valentine's Day, to sitting at the bar after the deployment with all the command unit soldiers and toasting their fallen brother. Next story. Can't expense my flight? Fine, I'll drive. Here's a bit of backstory. I just bought my house at the age of 27. I'm still so new to all of this, so when my mortgage company told me not to open any new lines of credit or even run a credit check, I listened. This was around the same time my company was launching an initiative to have company cards sent to their outside reps. Note it was optional until it wasn't. So my company offers to pay for flights, but they also offer to pay for mileage if you drive. Maybe you can see where this is going. I was asked to fill out a form to qualify for a company credit card. I didn't want to because of my closing, but knew I would have to eventually. I downloaded the form from Outlook and let it sit on my desktop. Now we didn't have our own manager at the time, so another region's manager asked me to fill it out. I politely declined at the time, because of the house. And in between then and now, our company finally hired our own manager for our region. Our new manager, let's call him Sam, was recommended and hired by our zone manager, the manager's manager. So everything they do has to be by the books. Well, about 4 months after declining a company card, the managers were told that it is no longer optional. Nobody relayed this to the reps who still didn't have a card, including me. So when the time came to buy flight tickets for our national meeting, I used my personal card. Well, this set off a chain reaction behind the scenes. Apparently, the zone manager pulled all the managers into a meeting and informed them that buying flight tickets with personal cards was grounds for a write-up. I was threatened with a write-up and was given this rejection comment on my expense report. You still have not sent in information for the company card despite being asked multiple times last fall by the substitute manager and last week by Sam. Multiple times last fall? Show me the paper trail. That's when I decided to cancel my $350 2-hour flight. If my company isn't paying me back, there is no way I'm dropping that much of my own money. Cue malicious compliance. I cancelled my flight and drove. The 12 hours it took by car totaled to way more than $350. I stayed at the fanciest hotel at the halfway mark and pocketed close to $1,000 in mileage expense. Keep your stinking company card. Edit. It was brought to my attention that company cards do not affect your personal credit, but how was I supposed to know that? I gave my closing as a reason to decline the card, and not one person bat an eye at all. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.